It was a Tuesday morning, the kind where the world feels like it's still half asleep. I'd just poured my second cup of coffee, the steam curling up in my tiny apartment kitchen, when my laptop pinged with a new email. I almost ignored it. My inbox is a graveyard of spam and client invoices, but the subject line stopped me cold. Urgent, Coastal Trust Bank, delinquent loan payment. My first thought was phishing. I mean, who falls for those anymore? But something about the bank's name felt familiar, like a half-remembered song. I clicked. The email wasn't long, but every word hit like a brick. Dear Elise Harper, we're contacting you regarding your business loan of $450,000, account number ending in 4729. Your payment is 60 days past due. Please contact us immediately to avoid further action. I stared at the screen, coffee forgotten, my pulse doing that weird thing where it's too fast and too slow at the same time. I don't have a business loan. I don't have any loans. My life is simple by design. Rent, utilities, a savings account I guard like a dragon. I'm a freelance accountant, for God's sake. I balance books, not borrow $500,000. I called the number at the bottom of the email, expecting some bored customer service rep to tell me it was a mix-up. Instead, I got Patricia, who sounded like she'd been trained to stay calm during a hurricane. Ms. Harper, she said, our records show you as the primary borrower for a business loan opened 2 years ago, tied to a small retail operation in Willow Creek, Oregon. The balance is $452.03 with interest. Willow Creek, my hometown, where my parents still live, where my younger brother Caleb had been talking about his big plan to open a coffee shop 2 years ago. Patricia, I said, my voice sharper than I meant. I've never owned a business. I've never even been to your bank. You've got the wrong person. There was a pause, the kind that feels like the universe holding its breath. Ma'am, she said, the loan documents list your full name, date of birth, and social security number. We have a signed application, notarized, dated September 2022. September 2022. That was when Caleb showed me his business plan over Skype, all excited about Caleb's Brew, a hipster coffee shop with exposed brick and overpriced lattes. He'd laughed about his credit score, called it a lost cause. My mom had chimed in, we'll make it work. Family always does. I hung up, polite somehow, and sat there, the hum of my fridge filling the silence. My hands were clammy, my throat tight. It had to be a mistake, right? A glitch, a typo. Someone else named Elise Harper in Willow Creek. But my gut wasn't buying it. I thought about Caleb, 27, charming, always dreaming bigger than his wallet. I thought about my parents, their endless faith in him, their endless excuses. He's finding his way, they'd say. And me? I was the one who made sure the bills got paid, the taxes filed, the paperwork signed. I was the one they called when things fell apart. I don't know how long I sat there before I moved. My apartment's small, just a one-bedroom with a desk, shoved against the window, but it's mine. I keep things organized, files labeled, receipts sorted. I went to the closet, pulled out a metal box where I store old documents, tax returns, insurance forms, a lease agreement from years ago. And there, buried under a stack of pay stubs, was a letter from Coastal Trust Bank. A generic thing. Thank you for choosing us, dated 6 months back. I'd tossed it, thinking it was junk mail. Now, it felt like a warning I'd ignored. Tore through that box, papers spilling onto the hardwood floor. There were things I hadn't looked at in years, forms I'd filled out for my mom when she broke her hip, loan applications I'd co-signed for Caleb's community college. My full name, my social security number, my signature, all there in my own careful handwriting. I'd handed them the keys to my life, piece by piece, because that's what family does, right? You help, you trust. But trust is a fragile thing. It doesn't break loud. It cracks quietly, like a hairline fracture you don't notice until the whole thing collapses. I sat on the floor, surrounded by envelopes and loose sheets, staring at the pieces of my life. I didn't have a business, a coffee shop, a loan. But someone did. And there was only one group of people who had everything they needed to sign my name to $450,000 of debt. My family. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed, the streetlight slicing through my blinds, replaying every conversation, every moment. I'd said yes when I should have said no. If they'd asked, would I have agreed? Maybe for a smaller amount, maybe to help with a plan that made sense. But that wasn't the point. They didn't ask. They took. And now, I was the one left holding the bill. That night, I didn't sleep. I just lay there, staring at the ceiling, the shadows from the streetlights dancing like ghosts. My mind kept circling back, not to the bank or the loan, but to the years before, the ones that built this mess. I'd always been the reliable one, the fixer, the daughter who didn't make waves. And maybe that's why they thought they could do this, because I'd never said no. Not really. Growing up in Willow Creek, our house was loud in the way small-town homes are. Dad with his baseball games on the TV, Mom with her endless phone calls to neighbors, and Caleb, my little brother, always the center of it all. He was 5 years younger, all charm and big ideas, the kind of kid who could talk his way out of anything. Spilled juice on the couch. I was experimenting. Forgot his homework. The dog looked sad. I had to play with him. And my parents ate it up. He's spirited, they'd say, like it was a badge of honor. Me? I was the quiet one, the one who cleaned up the juice, who double-checked Caleb's math homework before school. It wasn't that they didn't love me. That would have been easier to name, to fight. They just didn't see me as someone who needed anything. I was Elise, the one who figured it out. By 16, I was helping Mom balance her checkbook. By 20, I was filing their taxes because Dad said he didn't trust those online programs. When Caleb wanted to go to community college, but couldn't qualify for a loan, I co-signed without a second thought. Family helps family, right? That's what they always said. But helping wasn't the same for everyone. I remember when I was 25, saving up for a used car, a beat-up Toyota that wouldn't break the bank. I'd been driving Mom's old minivan, the one that smelled like stale Cheerios, and I wanted something of my own. I showed her the listing, excited, and she frowned. Elise, you know we're tight right now. Maybe next year. 3 months later, Caleb came home with a plan to open a t-shirt shop downtown. No business degree, no savings, just vibes. My parents didn't blink. They took out a second credit line on the house to fund it. The shop folded in 6 months, but no one called it a failure. He's learning, Dad said, like it was a noble quest. I didn't resent Caleb, not exactly. He was my little brother, the kid who used to sneak into my room during thunderstorms, whispering that the lightning was chasing him. I loved him. But love doesn't erase the math. He got grace, second chances, a safety net. I got expectations. Elise doesn't need help, Mom would say, almost proud. She's our rock. And I believed it, wore it like a medal, until I realized it wasn't praise. It was a cage. The worst part? I helped build it. Every time I said yes, signing. Forms, sorting their finances, bailing them out. I was teaching them I could carry more. I thought that's what love looked like. Duty. Sacrifice. But duty is a one-way street when no one's looking out for you. I kept thinking about a birthday card Mom gave me when I turned 30, 2 years ago, right before Caleb started talking about his coffee shop. It was one of those cheesy ones with flowers and glitter, but her handwriting stood out, loopy and deliberate. To our Elise, our pillar of strength. We'd be lost without you. I'd smiled, tucked it away, felt warm. Now, that card felt like a contract I'd never agreed to sign. Sitting on my apartment floor, The papers from my file box scattered around me. I saw it all clearly. They didn't hate me. They didn't even mean to hurt me. They just didn't think I'd break. To them, I was unbreakable, the one who'd always say yes, who'd clean up the mess and keep quiet. And maybe that's why they thought it was okay to sign my name to a $450,000 loan. Maybe they thought I was strong enough to carry it, or worse, that I'd never notice. But I did notice. And something inside me was shifting. Not anger, not yet, but a kind of clarity. Sharp and cold, like stepping out of a warm house into winter air. I wasn't their pillar anymore. I wasn't their anything. They'd taken my name, my trust, my future, and folded it into Caleb's dream like it was nothing. And for the first time, I wondered what it might feel like to say no. Not just to them, but to the version of me they'd built. The one who always fixed, always forgave, always stayed. The morning after that sleepless night, I woke up with a headache and a decision. I wasn't going to call my family, not yet. No texts, no shaky voicemails demanding answers. I'd spent my whole life reacting, fixing, smoothing things over. This time, I wanted facts. I wanted proof. Because deep down, I knew this wasn't a mistake. The pieces fit too well, and the truth was already clawing its way out. I emailed Coastal Trust Bank first thing, requesting every document tied to the $450,000 loan. The reply came faster than I expected, a PDF attachment labeled Harper Loan File 4729. I opened it, my laptop screen glowing in the dim light of my apartment. Page after page, there it was. My name, my birth date, my social security number, a business loan for Caleb's Brew, a coffee shop in Willow Creek, complete with a notarized application. And at the bottom of the last page, my signature. Except it wasn't mine. It was close, too close, like someone had studied my handwriting for years. But they missed the way I tilt the P in Harper, that little flourish I've done since high school. This signature was smoother, bolder, like it belonged to someone who didn't doubt themselves. It wasn't me. Looking at it felt like staring into a funhouse mirror, a version of myself I didn't know, created by someone else's hand. And I knew whose hand. I didn't cry, didn't scream. I just sat there, the weight of it settling in my chest. My family hadn't just borrowed money. They'd stolen my name, my trust, my future. And they'd done it so easily, like it was nothing. I could have called them right then, demanded to know how they could do this. But something stopped me. Maybe it was the part of me that was tired of being the one who begged for answers, who cleaned up the mess. Instead, I started digging. I went back to my file box, the one I'd torn apart the night before. Tax returns, insurance forms, old emails I'd printed when Mom's computer crashed. Every piece of paper I'd ever given them, every form I'd signed to help, was a key they'd used to unlock this lie. I spread them out on my kitchen table, a paper trail of my own making, and started sorting. By noon, I had a stack an inch thick, proof of every time I'd said yes when I should have said no. I didn't stop there. I pulled my credit report, something I hadn't checked in years because I'd always been careful. There it was, in black and white. A hard inquiry from Coastal Trust, a loan I'd never seen, and a credit score that had plummeted from 780 to 510. It felt like someone had punched me in the stomach. I'd spent years building that score, saying no to credit cards, paying my rent early. And they'd taken it, like it was just another thing I owed them. That's when I knew I couldn't do this alone. I'm good with numbers, not confrontation. I needed someone who could see through the mess. My friend Mara, a graphic designer who'd known me since college, had noticed I was off during our last Zoom call. "You look like you're carrying a piano," she'd said. I hadn't told her anything then, but now I did. I spilled it all, the email, the loan, the signature. She didn't interrupt, just listened, and when I finished, she said, "You need to talk to my cousin, Leo. He's a private investigator. He's good with stuff like this." Leo was exactly what I didn't expect. Mid-40s, wiry, with a voice like he'd smoked one too many cigarettes. We met at a diner 2 towns over, the kind with sticky menus and coffee that tastes like regret. I brought my stack of papers, and he flipped through them without a word, his pen scratching notes on a yellow legal pad. When he looked up, his eyes were steady. "This is identity theft," he said, like he was stating the weather. "Your family opened this loan, used your info, and forged your signature. I can dig deeper, bank records, notary logs, maybe even security footage. But you need to decide how far you want to go." "How far?" I asked, my voice smaller than I wanted. "To the police," he said. "To court, if it comes to that. This isn't just a family fight. It's a crime." The word crime hit like a slap. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. Leo agreed to start tracing the loan's origin, promising to call in a few days. But I wasn't done. Mara had another number for me, Diane Kessler, a lawyer she'd met through a client. Diane's office was a cramped room above a bookstore, walls lined with legal texts and a single dying plant. She was older, maybe 60, with sharp eyes and a handshake that meant business. I gave her everything, my stack, Leo's notes, the loan documents. She read in silence, then leaned back in her chair. "You know what this is, don't you?" she said. "Fraud?" I said, testing the word. "At minimum," she replied. "You can dispute this, file a police report, freeze your credit. But it's going to be a fight, and it'll burn bridges. Are you ready for that?" I thought about bridges. About the house in Willow Creek, the Sunday dinners, the way Mom's voice softened when she called me her rock. Were those bridges still standing, or had they been crumbling for years? "I don't want to destroy them," I said finally. "I just want my life back." Diane nodded, like she'd heard it before. "You're not destroying anyone," she said. "You're taking back what's yours." She laid out the steps. Notify the bank in writing, file a fraud affidavit, gather every shred of evidence. Leo would handle the investigation. She'd handle the law. And me? I'd handle the waiting, the part no one tells you about, where the truth sits heavy in your hands and you have to decide what to do with it. By Sunday, I couldn't put it off any longer. I had to see them, my parents, Caleb, the people who'd turned my life into a lie. Not to scream or beg for answers, but to look them in the eye and see if they'd flinch. Leo, the private investigator, had called 2 days earlier with enough to bury them. Bank records, a notary who'd overlooked discrepancies, even a grainy security photo of Caleb at the bank the day the loan was signed. Diane, my lawyer, had everything ready. A fraud affidavit, a police report draft, a letter to Coastal Trust. But I needed to hear it from them first, to know if they'd even try to justify it. I drove to Willow Creek, the 2-hour trip feeling like a lifetime. My parents' house hadn't changed. Same sagging porch, same rose bushes Mom tended like they were her children. I gripped the folder in my purse, the one with Leo's findings and Diane's documents, like it might burn through the leather. I hadn't told them I was coming. I knocked, and the door swung open almost instantly. "Elise!" Mom's face lit up, like I was just dropping by for coffee. "Perfect timing. The roast is almost ready." She pulled me into a hug, and for a second, I wanted to believe everything was normal. Inside, the house smelled like beef and rosemary. The same way it always had. Dad was in his recliner, eyes glued to a football game. Caleb sprawled on the couch, scrolling through his phone, an empty beer bottle on the coffee table. No one looked guilty. No one looked at me too long. Dinner was agonizingly ordinary. Mom served pot roast, mashed potatoes, and peas that rolled around my plate like they didn't want to be there either. She chattered about the neighbor's new dog, the church fundraiser. Caleb bragged about his coffee shop, how it was finally turning a corner. Dad grunted at the TV, half listening. I chewed slowly, my fork heavy, waiting for the right moment. I'd rehearsed the question in my head 100 times, but it still felt like a stone in my throat. After the plates were cleared, I set my napkin down and spoke, my voice steady, like I was asking about the weather. Hey, does anyone know? Anything about a $450,000 loan in my name? The room went still, the kind of quiet that presses against your eardrums. Caleb's phone froze mid-scroll. Mom's smile stuck, unnatural, like a mask. Dad shifted in his chair, clearing his throat. I didn't move, didn't blink, just watched them, waiting for someone to break. Mom spoke first, her voice soft, like she was soothing a child. Oh, honey, it's just paperwork. Caleb needed a boost to get the shop going. You weren't using your credit, and it's not like you're paying anything. She reached for my hand, but I pulled back, just an inch. Caleb jumped in, his tone defensive, eyes still on the table. You've got a perfect score, Elise. I don't. It's not fair if you won't help me out. I'm your brother. Not fair. Like I was the one being selfish. Like stealing my name was just a favor I should have offered. I looked at them. Mom, with her pleading eyes. Caleb, with his entitled slump. Dad, who hadn't said a word but wouldn't meet my gaze. These were the people who'd raised me, who'd called me their rock, their pillar. And they didn't see what they'd done as wrong. To them, it was family. It was expected. I nodded once, slow, deliberate. Thanks for clearing that up, I said, my voice quiet but firm. Caleb exhaled, already reaching for his phone again. Mom's smile relaxed, like she'd dodged a bullet. Dad leaned back, the tension draining from his shoulders. They thought it was over. They thought I was still their Elise, the one who'd swallow the hurt and move on like always. But they didn't know what I'd done. They didn't know about Leo, the private investigator who'd spent weeks tracing their every move. They didn't know about the bank records he'd pulled, the notary he'd tracked down, the security footage that showed Caleb walking into Coastal Trust with a folder under his arm. They didn't know about Diane, the lawyer who'd built a case so tight it could choke them. They didn't know I'd spent the last week turning their lie into a weapon, piece by piece, until I had enough to take back my life. I'm filing a fraud complaint tomorrow, I said, my words cutting through their relief like a blade. The bank's already been notified. I have evidence, documents, signatures, even video. This isn't just a family thing. It's a crime. The air shifted, heavy and sharp. Caleb's face went pale, his phone slipping from his hand. Mom gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Elise, no, she whispered. You can't do this. It'll ruin Caleb. His business. Everything. Dad finally spoke, his voice low, almost a growl. You'd turn on your own family? I stood, my chair scraping the floor. Family doesn't steal, I said. Family doesn't lie and call it love. I looked at each of them, really looked, and saw something I hadn't before. They weren't sorry. They were scared, not for me, but for themselves, for what this meant for their comfortable little world. Mom stood, reaching for me again. Please, Elise, let's talk this out. Don't make it public. Think about what people will say. I stepped back, my purse in hand. I'm done thinking about what you want, I said. I'm thinking about me now. I walked out, the door clicking shut behind me, softer than I felt. The night air was cool, the stars sharp above the sagging porch. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. I'd come to hear the truth, and they'd given it to me, not just in their words, but in their excuses, their blame. They'd shown me who they were, and I'd shown them who I wasn't anymore. The next morning, I drove to the police station. The officer behind the desk, a guy with tired eyes and a name tag that read Sergeant Ellis, took my folder, the one I'd built with Leo's evidence and Diane's guidance. He flipped through it slowly, his brow creasing deeper with every page. You're sure about this? He asked, not doubting me, but like he'd seen too many families tear themselves apart. If I don't, I said. They'll just keep taking. He nodded, stamped the papers, and that was it. Official. I mailed the fraud affidavit to Coastal Trust that afternoon, watching the clerk slide it into the outgoing tray like it was just another envelope. To me, it was a line drawn in the sand, a quiet severance. I didn't call my family. No warnings, no ultimatums, just silence. For a week, nothing happened. No texts, no voicemails, just the ache of waiting. Then, on a rainy Friday evening, there was a knock at my apartment door. Through the peephole, I saw Mom, her coat soaked, her face tight with something between anger and desperation. I opened the door but didn't invite her in. "How could you?" she said, her voice sharp but trembling. "Filing a police report? Dragging Caleb through this? He could lose everything." I looked at her, the woman who'd called me her pillar, and felt nothing but clarity. "You didn't ask me," I said softly. "You stole my name, my life. That's not family." Her eyes widened like my calm was worse than any scream. "We were helping Caleb," she insisted. "You're strong. Elise, you always have been. We thought you'd understand." Understand? I almost laughed, but it caught in my throat. "I understand now. I'm done being your strength." I closed the door, the latch clicking with a finality that echoed in my chest. That night, Caleb called 7 times, left voicemails I deleted without listening. I didn't need to hear his excuses. I already knew them by heart. A week later, Coastal Trust emailed me. The loan was suspended, pending investigation. They'd found irregularities in the notary records and were reviewing the signature. My credit score was still a mess, but the unraveling had begun. I called Diane. "They're taking it seriously," I told her. "They usually do," she said, "when you show them the truth without yelling." She was right. I hadn't shouted, hadn't begged. I just stood still and let the facts speak. The silence from my family grew thicker after that. No more calls, no guilt-laced texts about how I should be grateful for them. They didn't want to fix anything. They wanted the old Elise, the one who'd say yes and clean up their messes. But she was gone. In her place was someone new. Someone who filled her weekends with things she'd forgotten she loved. I started a painting class at the community center, my hands clumsy with brushes but steady with purpose. I bought fresh tulips every Sunday, their pink petals bright against my kitchen table. I read books without my phone buzzing, let the quiet settle like a warm blanket. Spring came, soft and green, the world waking up like it had something to prove. I kept my head down, signed Diane's documents, checked my credit report like it was a horoscope I didn't trust. One Saturday, I set up a booth at a local craft fair, my paintings lined up on a folding table. They weren't perfect. Uneven, lines, colors that bled, but I'd named each one Reborn because they weren't supposed to exist, but they did. A woman bought one, turning it over in her hands. "Why Reborn?" she asked. I smiled. "Because sometimes you have to start over to find yourself." She paid in cash and walked away, and I felt something settle inside me. That evening, I saw them, Mom, Dad, Caleb, standing at the edge of the parking lot near my apartment, like they weren't sure whether to come closer. They looked smaller. Then I remembered. Caleb's hair was messy, his jacket wrinkled. Mom clutched her purse like a lifeline. Dad stared at the ground. I walked toward them, slow, not hiding. "Elise," Mom started, her voice breaking. "We messed up, but we're still family. Please don't shut us out." Caleb stepped forward, eyes red. "I need help, just for a bit. The shop's in trouble because of the investigation." I set my bag down and looked at them. Each one really looked. There was no anger left in me, just a deep, steady quiet. I reached into my coat and pulled out a manila envelope. Inside was a copy of the forged loan document, their lie stamped void in red ink. Tucked behind it was the birthday card from years ago. the one that called me their pillar. I handed it to Mom. Her hands shook as she took it. I'm not your pillar anymore, I said. I'm not angry. I'm free. I turned and walked away, my footsteps loud against the asphalt. The sun was setting, painting the sky in pinks and golds. I paused at my door, the breeze lifting my hair, and whispered to myself, "You chose you." They'd used my name like it was theirs to take, but I walked away. No screaming, just a silence they couldn't ignore. If you've ever been someone's pillar, you'll know why I never looked back. Subscribe if you're done carrying someone else's weight. Share your story below. Some truths don't need forgiveness, just the courage to let them go.